Hello, everybody. We are live here on No More Mondays. I can't really ever tell when the live actually starts. So if any of you are tuned in and just staring at us oddly, that's exactly why. I am Angie Callan, and this is No More Mondays live here on LinkedIn. This is the podcast where we believe you can have a thriving career or business and an amazing life. And I bringing you guests who not only prove it, but who have the resources to help you live and work brilliantly. For all of you listening to this as a podcast, I do want to remind you that we go live every Monday morning at 10:15 Mountain, noon 15 Eastern via LinkedIn. So if you want to hear the conversations as fresh off the presses as you possibly can, that is where you can find us. Now, if you have followed along with me for even 5 minutes, you know I am a big fan of my career coach community. They are fun, they are intelligent, and a super collaborative group that I am very proud and honored to be part of, which is why I am excited to have one of them on the show today. But don't worry, if you think you're setting in for a conversation about resumes and cover letters, think again, because I have brought one of the other coaches who has a similar love of outdoors and adventures. Ben Wiant is helping people advance their careers with stories that sell. And the best part, he is doing it from the road as a digital nomad. He's also sharing his journey, literally and figuratively, by chronicling his travels on what and where he is learning from the road. It sounds a little like outdoor life lessons, doesn't it? I am excited to chat about careers, adventure, and alternative lifestyles because I've got some secrets that Ben doesn't even know about our alternative lifestyles. And all of it can help you live and work more brilliantly. So without further ado, let's welcome Ben Wiant to the show. Ben, welcome to No More Mondays.
Thank you so much for having me, Angie. I appreciate it. An awesome intro there.
I am
Fantastic.
excited because when I was getting our little, let's say, script together today, I hopped over to Ben's profile, and the first thing I saw was a post with a picture of a cat, and I was like, "Yay! I am not the only one who posts pictures of my cat on LinkedIn." So I know that we are going to get along.
Yeah, absolutely. Love the cats. Don't have any cats now with our nomadic lifestyle, but we did rescue a litter and a mama a couple weeks ago on
Oh
our
my
travels.
gosh,
That's what that post was all about.
where were they?
The mama brought the kittens to our back porch and on the side of the house. We fed them, we got them socialized, we got them trapped, we got them to a rescue, and they are doing well there and are already been posted to their website for adoption here in Montana.
Oh, awesome. And well, fun fact, if for those of you who do watch me on LinkedIn, you have met Taco Cat. And Taco Cat kind of came to us in a similar means. We were on a road trip, live in a little snapshot of our nomadic life, and went to a park and found a little 5-month-old kitten whose eyes were crusted shut, and he was like so bitty. He had been dumped, and he joined us on the road, and 2.5 years later, he is the Taco Cat, and he is not the scrawny little cat I thought he would. He's kind of a monster. So, as you can see, Ben and I already have a million things to talk about. We probably could just talk about rescuing cats for the next 37 minutes, but I really want to dig in and talk about this decision to become digital nomads, kind of what went into it. And in a way, it's an alternative lifestyle that I think a lot of people almost dream or say they wish they could have, but don't take the steps to do. And after spending almost the last 2 years traveling around the US and seeing all of our country has to offer, I want to know what really sparked the decision to set out on the road.
All right. Well, um, in all honesty, we are accidental nomads. This is not exactly what we set out to do when we set out to travel. So I'll back up a little bit. And for many years, my wife and I, well, we've been married for 12 years. And over the course of those years, we have always maxed out her PTO. I've been fortunate for the majority of our marriage to have unlimited PTO when I was working as a recruiter. And then having my own business obviously gives me flexibility there. And we're rock climbers, we're backpackers, hikers, national park geeks. We like to get out in nature and the outdoors and experience it in its fullest. And so we got tired of just doing, the 6 weeks a year that we have available to us in PTO and weekends. And so we decided that we wanted to what we called bounce. And so in many years we had planned this, but we knew we needed two things. One, we needed remote jobs, and two, we needed to have no animals. And when we got married, we had animals, and fortunately, they all passed over the course of the last decade. And then COVID hit, and March 2020. We both went remote. I decided to quit my job and start my own business. And 2 months later, at the end of May of 2020, right there at the beginning of the pandemic, worked out well, strangely enough. And then my wife got authorization to work remotely for the rest of her career. So both variables that we were waiting to happen were satisfied. So we were able to work remotely for the remaining parts of our career, and then also didn't have any animals that we had to attend to at home. So we wanted to bounce. We wanted to go someplace for a couple months at a time that we would normally vacation or just go climb or hike in, and then come back home to home base. And so that was our initial plan. And so we tested that out in the fall of 2022, went to West Virginia to the New River Gorge, spent a couple months rock climbing and having a blast there. One of our favorite places to go already anyway, from kind of a weekend warrior standpoint. And as we were there, we started thinking about, well, where's our next bounce going to be? And so we started talking about what that was going to look like. And we planned that for February of 2023, where we were going to go to Southwest Utah to St. George to go live for about 6-8 weeks and go rock climb. There's a ton of rock climbing there, access to all the national parks in Utah. So that's what we did. We planned that before we even left West Virginia. And then between kind of Thanksgiving and Christmas of 2022, after we had done that first bounce, planned the second one, we started talking in kind of hypotheticals. We said, well, what happens if we put our house up for sale? And what happens, and we said, maybe we want to move to West Virginia and spend our time there at the New River Gorge. And what happens if we put our house up for sale? And what happens if we sold it? And then we could just look for a place to buy or a piece of property to build on or whatever came to be, that we would have no pressure and be able to do it. And so we prepared the house for sale. New Year's came around, beginning of 2023. We went out of town for the weekend, put the house up for sale, had an offer on it when we returned 4 days later. And so we had 1 month to get out of the house because we were planning to leave on February 5th. And so made the 4-way decision about all of your belongings, which is an interesting thing moving into an independent, a location independent lifestyle where you have to decide, are we keeping this? Are we throwing it out? Are we donating it? Or are we taking it with us? And so
And
we made that.
when you love the outdoors, you have way more of that stuff than you think you do.
It is amazing how much gear we have with us.
Yep. So I find it interesting that because when you said accidental nomads, in a way that's true, but also there was a related intention, and I think the world conspired to kind of get you in it the way you should be. But before we came on the air, I said to Ben, I was like, we lived in a bus, right? And he was like, no, what are you talking about? And I'm like, this is why we have so much in common, because Jim and I also were like accidental bus lifers. And for us, it was more of a decision, a creative housing solution than anything. But we bought a gutted school bus, old yellow, wet like thing I would have gone to first grade in, on Craigslist, and turned it into a complete house before the pandemic made that super, super cool. And we lived in it for 4 years through the pandemic, which is, by the way, a great time of the world to have lived in a tiny house where nobody can really come visit you. But it was kind of like circumstances set us there as well. And we had the bus, and we had a 10 by 10 storage unit that I have always joked, Ben, was just full of outdoor gear and 2 very small pieces of heirloom furniture. So then when we bought our house 2 years ago, so we lived in the bus until 2 years ago. We bought our house, which was the whole goal of the bus. Achievement unlocked. I was serious. When we unloaded that 10 by 10 storage unit, I was like, wow, this really was full of a whole bunch of outdoor gear. So you have to pick and choose what you take with you based on the season, right?
Well, given that we are not near our storage unit where we've got all of our furniture, which we probably should have dispositioned before we went on this, now that we know that this 6-month nomadic journey that was going to buy us some time to find a place to live in West Virginia snowballed into a 4+ year on the road adventure. And so we have all the gear that we need with us. Now there's some stuff that's still back in storage. That's not stuff that is part of this this journey. But yeah, it's amazing. All the climbing gear, snowshoes, backpacking. We've got multiple 50-liter packs that all have
They're all packed. Yep. I
know,
also, by the way, love the New River Gorge. And fun fact, that was the trip. That was one of the destinations on the extended trip we were on when we ended up finding the cat. So there you go.
that's awesome. Love that town in Fayetteville.
at some point we also are river people. And
Mhm.
so at some point, like on Jim's bucket list is to go run the gully in the New, which we had intended to do, but it was 40 and raining and freezing cold when we were there. So we opted out of it, but it will be a return trip for sure. It's beautiful. And West Virginia, that John Denver was on some. I also grew up very close to West Virginia, but the northern part. So I love that as a potential destination. How often do you guys move around?
Well, first, before I tell you that, we're going to go rafting together when you get there. We're
Amazing.
not big river people, but if you live there, you've got to raft from
Yeah,
time
you
to
got
time.
raft. Yep.
Um, we move every 1 to 2 months. Right now, we are finishing up our first 3-month stay in Montana. Had a lot of plans for going into Glacier National Park every weekend, and so this past weekend, I think we just finished up our 22nd day in Glacier
Oh,
National Park over the last 3 months.
that's the
We've done
number one
some.
national park on the list of places I have not been yet. Oh, jealous.
It lived up to its expectations. It was fantastic. We've really enjoyed it, and but now we go to Yellowstone next week, and then we'll spend a week there vacationing, and then we'll go to the Tetons for a month, and then we'll go to the Dakotas for a month and knock out the national parks there. And so usually it's going to be minimum 4 weeks, usually 6 to 8 weeks. Occasionally we'll stretch it out into a 3 month, as with this one, and we've got another one I know next late spring, early summer in your area, over in the Denver area, where we'll be for about 3 months as well.
And don't worry, then it will be Ben and Angie live for real. Because
Yes,
I
it
will come.
will.
Well, we have to get you up to these mountains and see what we've got going on. And I know this because I asked before we came on air, but it's important for all of you to know that Ben and his wife do this. Also, by the way, we are similarly animal parents slash also had the period of time with no kids. It would be freakishly weird if you got married on October 21st of 2012.
We got married on April 11th of 2012.
Okay. Because when you said you had just been married for 12 years, I was like, this year's our 12 too. That would be weird. But Ben and his wife do this nomadic life through Airbnbs. So unlike RV or bus life, and actually having a moving dwelling, they hop from fixed place to fixed place. And how has that worked out? Have you gotten kind of like, well, it's been a year and a half, so I imagine you're not necessarily sick of packing up and moving every 1 to 3 months, but what have been some of the surprises as you've been on the road?
Surprises. The fact that I can repack the vehicle in exactly the same configuration every time that we have to repack it up. It's absolutely Tetris going in, Jenga coming out. And it's we drive a small SUV with a topper on it, and everything that we need fits in there. And so we don't have a lot of space, and space is limited. Anytime I want to buy something, or my wife wants to buy something, we have to figure out like what comes out, because there's no space for it to go in. I need to be able to see out the windows as we're driving around the country. Um, the couple of things that I realized is you don't need as much stuff as you think you do. That was a real big lesson.
Mm-hmm.
It's everything in our storage unit could disappear and we would be fine,
Yeah.
right? It's all
I was
stuff that can be
actually going to
replaced.
say that in response when we lived in the tiny house, it's just amazing what you don't need when you don't have space for it. And I actually think it really forces you into a different mentality about acquiring stuff in that regard as well.
You really find out like what's important to us. You know, what have we bought the most of? Like outdoor gear, clothes, shoes. Like those are the things that we buy. And we picked up some snowshoes at the very beginning of the trip because we knew that was going to be necessary. But other than that, like we go into stores in different towns, and all the housewares and whatnot, and in some of the tourist towns, and we just look around like we're not going to buy any of this stuff because there's nowhere to take it to. There's nowhere to put it.
Yeah. I
maybe
don't need
maybe in a
another
few
cat
years when we
toy.
have a home again. Yeah.
Exactly. So I'm also curious on the kind of the flip side. What are some of the like almost, and not that that's a negative, it's just an interesting finding, right? What are some of the like really memorable, unexpected bright spots of this time on the road that you never would have expected to be like, oh, as far as realizations go?
Well, I will say from a bright spot standpoint, especially for my wife who's very committed to saving cats. We fostered 50 cats and kittens over the 3 years before we went nomad, and so we were very involved with animal rescue back in Durham, North Carolina. And so that's something that's very near and dear to us. And so the opportunity to rescue this litter and family of kittens and cats recently was definitely a bright spot. I would say, yeah, I would love to say that it's the people that we meet, but it's really odd that we don't meet as many people as you would think, because we're not living in campgrounds, we're not living in RV
Mhm.
parks, we're living in Airbnbs. Although we're living in a community and living as if we lived in that community, we have found that locals are not as willing to invest time and energy into creating friendships with people that are going to be leaving sometime soon. And so, yes, we get to have some great conversations with people when we're out at parks or when we're at rock climbing crags or when we're at restaurants or at stores, but we don't necessarily build lasting relationships with them. And that's something that was a little bit of a surprise to us. We were hoping that being places for an extended period of time would give us that opportunity.
Mhm.
Um, Thankfully, Christine and I are a very strong partnership and unit, and so therefore we do okay with without having a small or large friend group to lean on a regular basis. So that works out all right for us. But that was a little bit of a surprise for us. Bright spots, man, it's we love being able to pick up and go try out different places. We don't look over our shoulder and as we're leaving and say, oh, we're going to miss this place. We look forward and think about what's next on the list. And the list is gotten pretty extensive at this point.
I was gonna
We've got
say, is there any like is long-term location living in the future, or is the list now gotten so long you're like, oh, we got to keep doing this for a while?
so we're booked through the end of this year as far as our Airbnbs. We know exactly where we're going to be from a date standpoint for 2025, and we'll start booking those here in the near future. We know, generally speaking, what we're going to be doing for probably 70-80% of 2026. We know that we're going to spend some months in Alaska probably to be able to hit those national parks there. There's 8 of them there that we need to knock off the list. We're at the end of this year, we'll be at 53 of the 63 national
Are you
parks.
gonna
And
try
so
to go? You're gonna try to go to all of them, right?
we are going to go to
Yeah,
all of
I
them.
pitched this to Jim one day, and he was like, that seems like a great idea until you have to go to places like Cuyahoga Falls National Park in Cleveland, which, by the way, we've been to.
And
But
which,
like,
by the way, is actually okay. We enjoyed it quite a
the
bit.
waterfalls there are pretty cool.
The trails and the waterfalls, we enjoyed them for being that big of a park in a suburban
Yeah,
metropolitan area. It was fantastic.
I love it.
Yeah.
So, what are your top 3 destinations so far? Put you on the spot.
Rocky Mountain National Park has a special place in our heart. It's a place where my wife's family spent a lot of time over the years, and once her parents retired, they'd spend a month there every year. So we've really enjoyed our time there. We went there last April for a month. It snowed on us. We stayed at a house that
Mhm.
was at 9,000 feet, a little bit outside of Estes Park, and we got a foot of snow every week. So that was a fun Winterland adventure. Um, we've really enjoyed our time here in Glacier. Bend, Oregon was absolutely fantastic. That wasn't a national park, but there's a Smith Rock State Park is a fantastic rock climbing destination, and Bend's food scene is awesome. We could walk from the house and hit the river trail, and get walks in, power walks and hikes in the afternoon in town. It was absolutely fantastic. Have access to wine country, have access to other large outdoor areas. We really enjoyed Bend. We're looking forward to going back there in the future.
And if you, I mean, I'm partial, I'm biased, but all 3 of those destinations were in the America West. And if you haven't, if you're an East Coaster, because I know there's lots of you here, Ben's, was living on the East Coast. I'm originally from the East Coast. And when I experienced the West, there's a reason I moved here. I came here and it called, right? There's a whole thing about the mountains are calling that's very, very legitimate. And just what you can see out here and the open spaces and the public lands is just absolutely amazing. And it's incredible to be able to like really understand the breadth of all of that as the 2 of you are gallivanting around the country seeing it.
Yeah, the American West is absolutely fantastic. It's unparalleled in its just massiveness and its expansiveness, and the amount of public lands that are out here. It's unbelievable. But still, one of the top places is the New River Gorge in West Virginia, the small town of Fayetteville, which is a gem.
So cool.
It is
It's
such a
so
gem.
cool.
And we bought a piece of property to build on when we're done. So
So there's a
we will
long
be going there.
term. Okay. So there is,
Yeah.
so that is where you'll land. It's just a matter of you get to do it on whatever timeline you want.
It's a matter of when. Yeah,
Yeah.
we've got a lot waiting there for us to build on, and if we decide to do something different, we can do that and disposition it and do something else. But in the meantime, that's the long-term plan. We've got some years to finalize that, and but in the meantime, we're having a blast
Just having
traveling.
fun. Well, and I think that now let's get to some advice because, again, going back to the fact that we are both career coaches, let's talk a little bit about some of our shared stuff there, even though this is a much more unique shared perspective and the adventures, because I am a huge proponent of the outdoor life lessons and what they can teach us.
Hmm.
And because of where I live, my life looks differently. And that's part of the aspect that helps me thrive and not just kind of exist. And so that was when we were going to talk, and I knew that you shared that and chronicling your adventures. It is something that we can totally learn from. And what I want to do together is talk about how people can do this. And this
Hmm.
is coming from the perspective of two people who have figured out how to have a thriving life and an amazing career and business for the two of us, but that have also figured out how to define that on your own terms. And I want to help people out there feel like this is approachable. And so, because we've both done this, but also because we coach people in career, I think that we are like 4x qualified to discuss this and give some advice, Ben. So, let's try to. I want to focus on 3 tips. I love to give practical advice here. Where do people start with this idea of looking at life differently, conceptualizing something that is maybe a little off the beaten path? You may not need to sell off everything and shove what's left into a tiny storage unit and hit the road. But what are your best pieces of advice on how to thrive in life and career? Give us some goodies.
This is the one thing that I want people to take away from uh, my logging of this every Friday when I write about it on LinkedIn is I want people to be inspired to do it in their own way. There's so many ways of living I think it's better to think about it in terms of living an intentionally designed lifestyle as opposed to living a nomadic lifestyle. People that have kids or animals or family that live nearby, picking up and leaving and traveling the country for months or years is oftentimes just not something that's doable. I've known people that have raised kids on the road for 8 years, so it is doable, but for many people, it's a bit of a stretch. So it's really about what is it that you wish you could do more of that you don't get a chance to do in your daily life? What is it that you can do that's a pattern disruptor in terms of your routine? And how can you make that part of your ongoing lifestyle? And that's going to be different for everybody. We all have unique variables to consider. We all have, different constraints, whether they be financial or family or kids or, um, investments, whether it be, homes that you just can't disposition for whatever reason or whatnot. So it it's all about what's important to you and how can you maximize the frequency of that in your life. I think that's step one, and that's going to be different for everybody.
I love the term maximizing the frequency of, because I think in that's never a term I've put on anything. However, in hindsight, that's exactly why I chose the lifestyle decisions I made. And I think a lot of times we don't stop and take priority and take stock of what type of lifestyle would we really want? What do we want to maximize our ability and access to? And then how can I design my career to support that? Because I think a lot of times we get stuck in, I call it the mediocrity trap. And I realized it 15 years ago when I left Boston, in the classic, golden handcuffs career track it would have been, live in the suburbs, that whole very traditional professional slash corporate track, and moved to the middle of nowhere to the mountains of Colorado. And if for all intents and purposes, it was very anti-mainstream. But I think that now we're in a place where you need to question whether the mainstream is really what you want or if you're just taking it by default.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you think about like what is it that you we've all got bucket lists, right? And everyone's got ideas about what they want to do in retirement. Well, how can you engineer a lifestyle to where you can do that now, right?
Yes.
Or at least do it in pieces now. It doesn't mean you have to go all in on it, but there's
But
so
more
many different.
than your 19.9 hours of PTO a year, just like you said at the beginning.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
And how can you design it? Interestingly, this is a fun fact. My wife's been at her company for 25 years. She gets 6 weeks of vacation, PTO. And last year, our first year of being nomads, doing 3 cross-country road trips, living in 9 different states, and picking up and moving every 1 to 2 months, it was the first year that we did not burn all of her PTO.
Because you can use it so much more strategically, and your access is different. So this was a big part of me. Like, for me, skiing is what brought me here. And we have a saying in the mountains that you come for the winter and you stay for the summer. And it is 190% true, because I got way more summer outdoor gear than I do skis, maybe. But I wanted to improve my access to the things that I like so that I can go out and mountain bike on world-class trails on a Wednesday after work. We can go fly fishing in gold medal waters, places that people take their week's vacation to go, on a Saturday afternoon for 3 hours. And I can go to ski in Aspen on a Saturday afternoon and come home and do something else. And so the way you allocate your time and your time off changes drastically when you maximize the access.
We traded house chores, yard work. I do miss my organic garden. I'm not going to lie. I do miss that. I miss being able to go out in the yard and pick dinner. But we don't have all those responsibilities anymore. And so I got to wash dishes and do laundry, and that's about it, right?
Yeah, and just,
And
read the Airbnb checkout instructions once a month. And also, I
that's
have
right.
to laugh because before we came on, I was talking about our garden. Now that, like, I think that we're probably like your next step ahead of your nomadic life, right? Like, our goal was to buy our house, and we did. And we've got this insane garden. And this weekend, literally, Ben, I spent canning all the tomatoes that we harvested. So yes, I haven't bought a vegetable in the grocery store in like 2 months. It's
Yeah,
fantastic.
it's awesome.
But trade-offs. Okay, so I love this idea of, I'm going to take point one and split it into 2 parts. It's maximizing access to the things you love, but I also think before you can figure out how to do that, you have to stop and prioritize and really be honest with you and your family about the things that you love and you want to maximize access to. So
Yeah.
that's like 1, 2, and 3 as a 1. So everybody's going to get way lots of advice, which is exactly what happens on No More Mondays. So what's another really great tip in kind of how to find this equilibrium? Is a new term. I was, as I was writing what we were going to talk about, Ben, I typed the word equilibrium, and I'm like, that is so much better than the balance word. But like, what's another tip you have in this kind of goal of career life equilibrium?
I like the word also integration.
Yeah.
Right? So how do you integrate your work and life? We live in our vacation, right? So we don't have to take vacations anymore because every weekend is a snapshot of what would normally have been a vacation. And that's the reason we didn't burn all her PTO last year. And she can work and review documents and send emails while I'm driving for 8 hours at a stretch to another part of the country. She can run shotgun
Sounds very,
and
very familiar. Jim
she can.
Drive, Angie writes resumes. Yep.
That's it. And so on the other hand, she's working. She's got the big corporate job, and then I drive. So it works out. It's like the flip side there. So I think that idea of living in your vacation, like what would that look like, and how can you define that for you? Maybe you and I are very much mountains people, expansive out west, hardcore outdoor activities. But maybe it's beach life, right?
Yeah.
Maybe it's lake life. Maybe it's river life. Like what is it that brings you peace? Where's your happy place? And how can you get there more often? And what does that look like? There's so many different platforms out there nowadays. We use a platform that we try to find house sits for, right? And it doesn't cost anything. And we do it so we can go hang out with people's animals, right? Specifically their cats.
Dual effect.
That's right. So, there's platforms like that out there. There's house sharing platforms. There's house sitting platform. There's all different ways that you can go places and not necessarily incur a massive cost to be able to go do what it is that you want to do on an ongoing basis. You just have to get creative and do some research, figure out if there's platforms out there that'll help enable what it is that you want to do, or you've got to prioritize and say, what are we going to spend our money on? Are we going to spend our money on X, Y, and Z, or are we going to do it on A, B, and C? And A, B, and C being those things that are going to allow you to create more of an integration between your work and life. Now, we have to be honest here, right? Is that not everybody's job provides the flexibility for them to be able to live a nomadic lifestyle or a travel-based lifestyle. But it really is about making decisions and prioritizations around the things that are important to you, and not allowing yourself to get trapped into the routines
Mhm.
that we are so susceptible to. One of
There's
the
an
interesting
element of
things,
choice there, is what I would say,
very
because
much about choice.
and a lot of times we just by default don't make a choice, which is a choice. You're just not necessarily conscious to it, which to me goes back to a word you said earlier, which is that intention. So not only integrate, but being intentional about integrating, taking stock, and designing something that you have more control over, curating, than I think most people think, feel, or realize they have.
Yeah, absolutely. We all have the ability to choose. And like you said, sometimes we choose not to choose to do something, and we end up reverting back to what we've always done. And we've already done that, right? And where's the newness in that? Where's the learning in that? Where's the adventure in that? Perhaps people don't want adventure in their life. I thrive on adventure and always, look forward to what comes next in terms of, what's around the next bend, or what's around, what's in the next state, or what's in the next year. That's always exciting to me. But finding out what gets you excited, what gets your family excited, what kind of experiences and stories do you want your kids to be telling
Mhm.
as they grow up, right?
And I think the
Those are
climate, the social, like the social economic, there a lot of culture in general has changed to allow us to be asking these questions more than we used to be able to, which
Mhm.
is also why I think a lot of people default into the kind of, you know, way it used to be with not setting the intention, not integrating, because we're still getting used to being able to. And there's something to be said for doing what you dream of doing in retirement now. So
Mhm.
instead of waiting until you're in your 60s or 70s, we are going to live longer, everybody. We may not be able to retire as completely like people used to with pensions. Um and so it's almost prolonging doing the things that we should be doing when our bodies are younger, if you're an
That's right.
adventurer or whatever it may be. But if you're having trouble envisioning what Ben and I are talking about, stop and think, what's the thing that you always say, oh, when I'm retired I'm going to move to the beach, or when I'm retired I'm going to do X. Find a way to do that now.
Absolutely. And we have to be able to, here's the other thing I think that we really have to wrap our heads around is we have to be willing to let go of things, right? There's things, whether it's, do we miss our friends back in North Carolina? Yes. But there's some trade-offs, right? You have to be willing to let go of certain relationships. You have to be some certain things, certain places, certain routines in order to take on new ones. We force the issue by moving every couple of months, right? Every place we move, we take on new routines, new
Yeah.
patterns. It's forced based on what we have available to us in the area. Right. So it's like, when we came here to Cut Bank, Montana, the small little one stoplight town, an hour east of the Glacier National Park in the middle of farmland, and an hour across an Indian reservation, we chose that we weren't going to drink alcohol while we were here. And we said that we weren't going to eat out because there's nowhere to eat
Nowhere to
out.
go.
There's no restaurants here there's no restaurants here,
Yeah.
generally speaking. And we
It,
decided that we were going to change our patterns when we were here. And so that was something that changed just based on this location and what's available to us here. And so, in other places, we choose to go do things after work. We work East Coast hours even when we're on the West Coast. And so we
which
get
is
up
nice.
early.
Then you end up with afternoons to be able to do things.
That's right, 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. We're able to go out and go for hikes or go climbing or whatever it is that the place allows based on the environment or the activities. We're able to do those in the afternoons and not have to wait to the weekend to go do those, or have to take time off to go do those
Mhm.
things.
I love that you brought up the idea of trade-offs, because this phrase of the, like, or I'm going to say maybe even my new mission to help people realize you can have a thriving career in business and an amazing life. As I was trying to kind of workshop and wordsmith this, the idea of with no trade-offs kept coming up, because in a way it's empowering people to know they can, but it's really about on your terms, because you will have to make trade-offs. They're just things that you are choosing to make, whether it's, I'm not going to live in my big house, I'm going to downsize, save money so that in a year I can move to a different place. Or like you, okay, we're going to make the trade-off of having a super connected community around us all the time, knowing that we can survive on each other and some nice strangers that we meet along the way. So I love this idea of like being honest about trade-offs that aren't negative, they're just choices, and then and to some extent pattern changes can become easy trade-offs as a mechanism to have more options around what may and may not work for you. Because I mean, even just from a career perspective, Ben, how often have you talked to somebody who says, I want to change careers, but I don't want to take a pay cut. I don't want to move. I don't want to have to go to an office, and I have to have my same benefits and PTO. And you're basically like, okay, like if you want to change, something will have to change, is maybe a really good way to talk about this in a more constructive light that doesn't make you feel like you're sacrificing. You're making choices for the benefit of change.
We are under no obligation to be the same person we were 5 minutes ago or 5 years ago.
That's an awesome statement. Can you say that again, please?
You are under no obligation to be the same person you were 5 minutes ago or 5 years ago. And so what that means is you can recreate yourself whenever you want. And yes, things will be different. And yes, you will have to let go of certain things. But think about what you gain. And if you do the intention right behind it and the decision-making process right, what you gain should outweigh what you let go of. Or it's an even trade, and it's just going to be different. The good news is you can always go back.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I was having this conversation with a client who's living in the UK and has the opportunity to move to the US within the company with a visa sponsorship. And his family is very much like, I don't know if we should do this. What do you do? And he and I had that very conversation. He's like, you can always move back. I remember saying that to myself whenever I moved from the East Coast, which was much closer to my family. That's a trade-off I had to be willing to make. And Jim and I talk about a lot is the fact that we live so far from our families, but we know we have a quality of life and access to the things that we love that we wouldn't have there. And those were choices and changes that, we were willing to make, knowing we can always go back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, and I think that's the hardest thing for a lot of people to wrap their head around, is that you can change and you can live in a different path of life, and that you can, if it doesn't make sense, if it doesn't work, if it doesn't satisfy you, you can always go back and adopt what you had been doing previously.
And then you will know, you will never be able to say, I wish I had. And that's that kind of stuff that you got to look forward and say, well, I regret not trying.
Absolutely. There are a couple of things that also led us down this path too, which was, we're not getting any younger. And, we had a friend who was a little bit older. He retired. The day after he retired, he had a heart attack and died, right? You never know when your last day is going to be. You have to maximize every moment that you have available to you. And if you're not finding joy in each of those moments, then are you maximizing? That doesn't mean like you always have to be doing something, but are you maximizing what you want to get out of life now, today, because tomorrow's not guaranteed?
You just gave me about 3 mic drops, but I think that there was like the 3 tips, and then there's the 3 takeaways that I like better, which are, what can you maximize today instead of putting off until tomorrow? If you want change, you have to be willing to change. And the big one is, you are under no obligation to be the same person in 3 seconds than you are right now, yesterday, or 5 years ago. And I love the idea of giving permission to everyone out there that that's the case, because I think that we put so much pressure on ourselves and don't allow ourselves to explore what we want, know what we want to maximize access to, and know who we want to be in order to live a more fulfilling life now, instead of putting it off to 62 and a half.
Yeah. And these decisions don't come just overnight. We talked about this for years, as I was talking about at the beginning of the conversation. And then we executed on it, and it morphed, it changed.
It morphed, I know.
It took on a life of its own. And we decided that we were good with that, and that we could continue on with that, because we trialed the experiment. We then got into the experiment and we decided to continue it. And because it made sense for us and it brought us joy. Had it not, we would have pivoted and done something else.
And that's a really good message to kind of take away from this overarching conversation, just kind of as we wrap things up, is that you can take one step towards these things we're talking about. You can take one step towards maximizing access. Does it mean you take Friday afternoons off so that you get an extra afternoon doing the thing you want, or that you can get to the beach before there's traffic or whatever there is? You don't have to do something as drastic as selling off all your stuff, shoving what's left in a storage unit and moving into a bus or random Airbnbs. You don't necessarily have to go that far. Take a step. And just even like Ben and I both experienced, even in kind of those more drastic decisions, the plan still morphed into, like for us, we thought we were going to travel in the bus more, and we found a great home base. And now the people that we live near, we ended up quarantining with, and they're two of our best friends, right? So like the plan will end up working out differently than you think it will, and that's okay. But you've got to make a step, and that can be a small step. That could be a huge leap of faith. And then there's a whole lot in between, even if the digital nomad and the chick that lived in a bus are more extreme examples.
It's, we've both said over the last 18 months, the best decision we've ever made. Best decision. Yeah. It's the freedom that you have from living an intentional lifestyle. And I think it goes back, let's wrap this back to, the career space, right?
Yes.
Being intentional about the work and the companies that you seek out to work for and with, and the people, is so important, right? Not just applying for a job and accepting a job because it's a job that pays you a paycheck. I get that we all have to make ends meet, and sometimes we have to take something that is not ideal. But if you're being proactive, you're being very intentional about what it is that you want in life, and then go finding the opportunities that will fit with that model of life is very possible. It's not something that happens overnight. It may take years to accomplish, but you're being very intentional in making those decisions about, this is the way that I want to live. What work or company that with whatever benefit plan will allow us to do this. My wife's got a corporate job. She's been out for 25 years. She now is at a place where she's able to work remotely. The pandemic gave us that gift as well. Mm-hmm. But that is, it's possible, right? I've worked with plenty of people that have corporate jobs that have flexibility. Now, our flexibility is limited to domestically to the U.S. because she works on government contracts through her employer, and therefore she has to be within the United States when she logs in the systems. So we can travel on vacation out of the country, but we can't live nomadically outside of the country. So that's one of the restraints that we have.
That was a trade-off.
Yeah, that's fine.
That got you all kinds of other things. I love the summary about being intentional about the work and the companies you seek out. The way I have always said that is design your life and then align the work to that design instead of just letting chance happen to you. It is so important to helping you get a step closer to living and working brilliantly. And when you know what you want that life to look like, it is easier to find the fit and the model that all kind of jives. Set priorities, seek it out, and be patient. It may take a little time, but it will come. Ben Wiant, how's that for a summary of our conversation today? Thank you so much for joining me.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me. Love the conversation. Hope that those that are either watching or listening have some inspiration to think about how they might be able to think about and construct their life in a way that brings more joy. That's what we're here for, right? Is to enjoy the moments that we have and do that with the people that we love.
And that's why Ben and I do the work that we do, is to help you see it's possible. And I think in both of our cases, to be a catalyst to making it so. And on that note, I hope all of you will remember that you are under no obligation to be the same person now as you were 5 minutes ago or 5 years ago. And on that note, I hope all of you will follow along Ben's journey. He posts some amazing content on LinkedIn, literally sharing the journey and also the figurative journey as well, with some great insights, photos of their adventures and more, and cats. So Ben Wiant, thank you so much for being here again today, sharing your wisdom and experiences, and also just being vulnerable to the choices that you've made that have gotten you in a good path of alignment.
Thank you so much. And I love learning about your path and journey as well. It's fantastic. And we'll continue the conversation.
Bus life makes you really interesting at parties, I'll tell you that. So does digital nomadness, right? If you all out there want the details from today's episode, visit us at nomoremondays.info. And don't forget, if you are listening to one of the podcast streams, that we do come at you live on LinkedIn every Monday morning and then release to the feeds in the afternoon. So you have countless ways to consume the No More Mondays Stoke. Thank you all so much for joining me today. Thanks again to Ben. I will see you next week for another episode of No More Mondays Live.